The Balenciaga conspiracy theory. Or is it? Everyone now knows that, just look at the pictures yourself. There was this Balenciaga campaign with obvious children and whatever you call this stuff.
The sexualization of minors.
Yeah,
That's the easiest way to explain
disgusting
it.
stuff. Before we go into some of the more deeper things, just at face value, you would say, how could something like this be allowed? But Justin, as we know, the story gets much deeper.
Running down the rabbit hole just for a second, I think one of the best ways to kind of frame this stuff, whenever you're given an extraordinary claim, is to remember that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And then you add it into this, who benefits, is a Latin phrase, cui bono, that kind of sums this up. Or you could kind of say maybe like, follow the money. So here's the question, right? There's several questions on this. Number one, why would a clothing brand that assumingly is run by competent management, in other words, management that wouldn't necessarily make this mistake, why would this mistake be made in the first place? And if it wasn't a mistake...
Well, Justin, look at, now Balenciaga is suing the creative masterminds behind this children's warped theme. That is not enough. I know what you're going to say. Okay, yeah, you're suing the person who let this come to pass, but wouldn't you assume that there is a lot of layers that this has to get passed through? Just for the people that don't know, I mean, if you have never ran a company before, if you have this massive multi-billion-dollar company and this is going to be one of your biggest photo shoots and you're going to post this everywhere, this is going to get checked and approved by many people. So just to come after the creative mastermind and to frame this person as the worst human being ever is not enough. I would like to know every single person who looked at this and approved the kind of creative design and allowed this to be posted.
As I said, follow the money. Whose signature is on that check? Anyways, I would also say this too. So let me just put this aside for 1 second, give you like a very big, like hierarchical way of looking at this. Suppose that you wanted to control, or suppose that you were very rich, very powerful, coming from, old world, old money families. So just like start there. And you've been in business a long time, and I mean a long time, and you've had multiple generations, maybe millennia to compound wealth. And I would suspect, even though I can't prove it, I just think, well, if I was that, what would I do? Well, number one, I'd want a way to project and control, the people out there. So let's just like run through a thought experiment. Suppose you had wealth, lots of wealth. You would probably also know that one of the worst things, one of the most dangerous things to be in life is to be wealthy and weak. In other words, you don't want people to know that you're wealthy. And even if you have a lot of strength, that kind of sends up a red flag in itself. So I think I would be very curious to establish a system where I could have other people do my bidding and stand in the shadows, which is probably just a fancy way of saying I'm standing behind the people who are standing behind the people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I oftentimes quip that whether you like, I'll pick on Hillary Clinton for a second, whether you love her or hate her, my argument would be that this is basically mid-level management, for the powers that be. Anyways, so let's say you're a power that be, one of these people, staying in the dark shadows or whatever, right? Well, how do you actually control your politicians? Right, left, it doesn't matter. Well, one argument goes is that blackmail on these politicians is the way that you control them. And if you have blackmail on these people, what's the worst or what is the most effective blackmail you could possibly get on these people? And not to go too far off the beaten path, but I would suspect that crimes involving children, and I'll just kind of leave that generically said, is probably some of the best blackmail material one could ever amass on a politician. Because if a politician goes and willingly submits, to, should we say, this apparatus called cabal, whatever you want to say, shadowy figures in the dark, and in return for like literally selling their soul to the devil, they get, the power, prestige, or whatever, right? Then everyone's happy because our politician or politicians, are basically protected by the apparatus of this entity, whether it's the control of the media, whether it's people looking the right way, things being quieted down, or things being trumpeted up or whatever, right? Think about FTX and SBF, look at how quickly that story is fading from the public perception. I'm not saying SBF had anything to do with this. I'm just simply noting the coincidences that if people want a story...
odd ties that FTX had to Ukraine and to different medicines. We did a video on this and it got boofed off the face of the planet. It is just very odd. And now what perception are they turning Sam Friedman and SBF into? They're turning it into just some dumb kid who lost a bunch of money.
You had a savior complex.
Now that's just that is just the mainstream media brushing it under the table. And everything goes. I mean, I hate conspiracy theories because it's hard enough. And I think Doug Casey puts it best, it's hard enough to get 10 people together and decide what you want for dinner. How are you going to have thousands of these people that can all conspire and make this new world order? Sorry, Klaus. That it just doesn't make sense. But when someone like Klaus Schwab comes out and gives this rubric, or at least it seems like Klaus is telling all these people what to say, and then every single politician says all these things, it's just hard not to, it's almost like burying your head in the sand and trying to avoid it if you're not against any sort of conspiracy.
So my brother says that he gave an argument that's very, it's a good argument to have. Like, he says, like, Justin, look, like, imagine how many people have to be in line in order for this to happen. Imagine how many people have to be lined up for that. And this is a very fair question that deserves a very good answer. And I don't have a good one. I mean, I have one, which basically boils down to this. Number one, a conspiracy that's in depth and being around this long, by definition, would be in the shadows. But if it is successful, it would not be seen. Now, the problem with that logic is you can use that to justify anything. So I just throw that out there, but not so much as a, see, this is I'm right, but rather it still logically holds together at the same time. And the second thing I would throw out there is, look at all what I call the low confirmation points of data we have. Consider what happened with Epstein. You had arguably the most high profile person in the federal prison system that managed to kill himself. Twice, on a second attempt, not his first, but on a second attempt. At the same time, the cameras failed. At the same time, the guards were asleep, and so on and so forth. You just kind of scratch your head and say, I wonder what's going on there. And you could go back even further than this. And we'll get back to Balenciaga in just a second.
You could go right back to a year before I was born, Justin. And I was born in September in 2002. For those
that's going back to 9/11. That's we'll save that for another video, but for anyone who wants to follow Cult 93 and all that shenanigans, well, they know who they are.
But this is about Balenciaga, so I mean, Justin. Wait, 1 second.
Go. Yeah.
Before you say anything, let me just propose you with some of the things that are actually in this photo shoot. So right here, what you are looking at, this actually got fact checked from Twitter itself, because. Are you
serious?
Yeah. So this is one of the papers just zoomed in. This is in the photo shoot. And what is it? It is an excerpt from the U.S. Supreme Court, United States versus Williams, which upheld a part of federal child pornography law. So I am just confused. And this literally got fact checked by Twitter itself. Why is Balenciaga having an article about child porn in their kids' photo shoot, where the kids are wearing and looking terrified with these bears that are just incredibly sexualized?
Yeah, and not just sexualized, but SDM.
Yeah, so I mean, if you go further down, and I mean, Twitter does a great job of uncovering this kind of stuff. So you don't even have to look too deep into it. What company misspells its own name? So right here, Balenciaga with this rope is not spelled correctly. It's spelled B-A-A-L.
Oh, no, they spelled it correctly. Oh, it's spelled correctly.
So what does that stand for? I mean, that is quite literally the child sacrificial kind of Satanist worshiper.
Yeah, Josh, let me give you some context. So if you go back in time, like if you look at Baal was, I think, one of the Canaanite gods back in the day, but basically it revolved around child sacrifice. In other words, like you would offer your firstborn, to that. And what's going on is that, in that bottom left-hand or the top left-hand picture right there, the parents are placing, the firstborn into the hands of this, statue or whatever, right? And there's a big fire that was lit, and like the baby infant would slide into, the fire, screaming, crying or whatever, right? And that was, how you, kind of, make your pact with the devil or whatever, right? And, this is arguably has come, I mean, this is above my pay grade, but, there's multiple names that this concept goes by, Baal, Moloch, or however you say it, and so other things. But basically, whenever you see a cow that you kind of put people inside, particularly children, that's one of the things you want to pay attention to. Another thing you want to pay attention to is when high-profile people lose their firstborn child. That's one of the other things that supposedly kicks around in the occult, is that in order to kind of like join the club, in addition to willingly submit for blackmail material. So in other words, you are encouraged to do these things so that you get into higher and higher ranks. In other words, because there's more and more control they have over you. There's another, and this gets where it gets really wild, where what people do for their firstborn kids, and it's not a pretty picture. But anyways, going back to, all this stuff, what I would say is for everyone who comes back and says like, this is just ridiculous. Well, number one, yeah, it's ridiculous that we've been having to have this conversation, but consider this, like, think about Epstein and think about how strange that was. Now consider, Epstein's madame, oh, I can't say her first name, Ghislaine Maxwell, whatever, excuse me, Ghislaine Maxwell. And think about this, I think the trial concluded last year sometime. Why don't we know her clients? Like, seriously, like, why isn't this public record? Like, why can't we publicly shame, or maybe even worse, her clients? And my suspicion is that the reason we can't do it, Ghislaine's clients, the people on that list, are the very people running the shit show. And my point is that logically, if you were running, some shadowy conspiracy type thing or whatever, right? You would want the people that the public thought that they elected into power, you would want to have the most damning, most vile, most horrific control you have over these people. Moreover, and this gets back into Balenciaga, if you thought the scam was about to unravel, I would work really damn hard to try to normalize this so that when it finally comes out, the public outrage won't be as bad. That, you could say, would be a motivation, kind of like, cui bono, like who benefits
by that,
from this
normalization of children and pedophilia type of way, because the deeper down you go, the more crazy you feel. Because what person, I mean, okay, there's this 30-year-old dude, he never got a girl before, maybe he wants to get with this young 15, 16-year-old chick. Some of them look pretty old, understandable. But let's talk about infants. I'm talking 1 year and younger. That's the type of pedophilia that is, I don't even want to say really going on, but you're digging your head in the sand if you want to deny these kind of possibilities.
Oh, yeah. And just let me give you some other names. So forget Epstein for a second. Think about Jerry Sandusky. Think about I can't say the guy's name, the Dutroux affair. Here's another one. Google Tony Podesta artwork. But don't do that from a work computer. And don't use Google. Use like DuckDuckGo or something else. There's a real walk in the woods when you see the stuff that goes on here. What's the phrase? The thought precedes the deed, as does the lightning the thunder. When you look at these pictures of art, ask yourself, what is the thought? And then ask yourself, what is the deed that thought precedes? And you can draw your own conclusions.
So, okay, Josh, Justin, this sounds completely crazy. But wait, Justin, if someone was doing this, why would they tell you about it? And this gets into something that Andrew Tate actually just mentioned, but Justin's mentioned this to me thousands of times. If you are a satanic worshiper, Justin, can you kind of walk us through this process? Because anything that you see in this photo shoot, it will have some sort of tie to some sort of satanic ritual. And why would anybody who does this, who worships Satan, want to openly say this? Justin.
Yeah, so this is really above my pay grade. So first off, Josh, I don't know the answer to the question, but one of the things that I have read multiple times and across multiple cross currents is that, let me just call it the bad guys, as maybe the way I would refer to them. For whatever odd reason, they have this concept of karma. In other words, like if they do bad things for you, for example, let's say that they're trying to poison you with a medical treatment, and if they force you, at gunpoint, to get this or whatever, right? Then, and if it's deleterious to you, or if it's bad for you, then somehow that rebounds upon them. Like, I don't know how they reconcile it. I don't know how they account for it, but this concept of listen, we being the bad guys can't necessarily trick you. We can't slaughter you directly, but we can get you or trick you or present facts in a way where you will slaughter yourself.
Let's take an example that Andrew Tate just used with apples. Let's say there was a satanic worshiper who went to go sell apples, and he was selling poison apples, and he just labeled it apple. If somebody was to go buy that apple, bite into it, and die, you are now directly responsible for that person's death because they died. It was poisonous, and you did not tell them. In fact, you completely misguided them into doing it. But again, if instead of leading them into their direct death, basically shoot them in the head, if you label this poison apples, then that same person comes up and says, oh, poison apples, ha ha ha, takes a bite, and then he dies. That is on their own stupidity for biting the apple. Therefore, this is not on me. This is for this absolute Rubleton who does not deserve to be here anyway. And that is the satanic view, where they have to tell you. It is going to be indirect and as subtle as possible, but to rationalize what they are doing, they have to tell you in advance what they are going to do. Yeah, and this is just a satanic person's worldview. I mean, and if you can reason it, that these people who actually if there are people who are actually satanic worshipers and this is their worldview, that they have to indirectly tell you what they're going to do, then you can look at what they are doing from a different lens, and it really opened it up.
Yeah, the other thing about that too is that there's one other person, Josh, I don't think we've ever done a video on him. His name is Ron, was it Ron Bernard? He was a banker. Maybe I've showed you it too. We'll do a video of this in the future, but this was a banker to the elites who basically came clean. And you can see, he did an interview, it's in Dutch, but it's translated over. And there's a scene in the middle where basically he gets to this point where it's like, listen, what you have to, and this is me poorly paraphrasing it, what you have to understand is that these people being the elites, they subscribe to a certain kind of religion. It's almost like you would call it satanic. And at first I thought, oh, whatever, people wearing silly wigs, dresses, hocus pocus or whatever, right? But then you see he gets really guarded with this language. But then when you get up high enough, as I had gotten high enough, I was taken to a place, and he's very, very cautious with his language. He was taken to a place, and I was asked to do something to a child. And at that point, I just couldn't do it. And I was lucky enough to get out. Now, you don't just walk out the front door of, this particular organization. And I suspect one of the reasons he's still alive is that he has been very careful about not going too far. And God, I hope he has a dead man switch in that regard. But my point is that you see various bits and pieces of this leak out. Again, Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein, Jerry Sandusky, the Dutroux affair, Ronald Bernard, whatever that banker, that Dutch banker, and probably many others that I don't know.
And with pedophilia too, you can see the normalization of it as a progression. At first, they just roll it out. It's to test the water, see what is the public's perception of, let's say, pedophiles. So they'll kind of roll out, oh, is this that bad? And you can see articles, news, everyone, Netflix is trying to change its perception of how bad a pedophile really is. Oh, it's not a pedophile, it's a minor liker.
A minor attracted person. Was it cuties? Was that the smut they were serving up?
It's just
remember that
dumb. They're trying to normalize it to the point where, as Justin said, if something was to get into the public, it's not as bad than if it's just your first initial reaction. And this is something that you've seen happen over and over again with so many different things.
Yeah. I kind of wonder if these people, if it's actually going to be safe for these people to walk down the street. Someone said that a long time ago, and I can't remember who it was, but another topic for another video. But yeah, do you know what they do to pedos in prison, Josh?
Yeah, I do.
Well, does not bode well. So,
but these people never go to prison. Just like we saw with one of the Maxwells. There's always ways to suicide yourself with the lights off and the guards asleep.
Yeah. Do you know who Ghislaine Maxwell, or who her father was? It was Robert Maxwell, who was like one of these top tier Israeli spies for Mossad. Interesting. Well, I'm sure there's no relation.
Either way, Balenciaga, what is going on? The deeper the story gets, the more satanic and odd everything there represents. But there is good news. We see places like Twitter now. We see people coming up, and anytime one of these weird things spurts out, people are attacking them vigorously, just like they deserve. And people are actually trying to uncover the truth. So people say we're completely screwed if the elites can screw with everything, if they're in control of every single micro organization in the world.
No. Well, let me put a quick interjection to that one, Josh. The answer is they want you to think they're in control, because if you think that they're in control, and they're really not, as long as you think it and perceive it, you're not going to. It's like, oh, I would if I could, but I can't, so I won't. No, I fundamentally disagree with that. We the people, as dumb and hokey as it sounds, oh, no. These idiots work for us. We do not work for them. And until the public wakes up and remembers that, and I think hopefully the public can.
But this is where I'm saying it's good news. The more shit that they throw at you, and this is, once you start to distrust the government, you will never give that trust back. At least it's like if someone cheats on you in a relationship, you're never going to be able to trust them the same again. So it starts with the cerveza sickness, which opens up millions of people's eyes to the corruption in government. And then you go on to a war that's going on right now. And then those people who are already skeptical of the government, it is much easier once you see more and more stuff get piled on to jump onto the bandwagon of not trusting the government. And then as more and more stuff happen, those same people who didn't trust the government, they never go back on the same side. It's just more people piling on. And then you see more people talking about this, and then
Yeah.
more people getting enlightened. And we're not even saying that we're right about all this, but it is just extraordinarily odd. And I'm
Yeah.
sure this video is going to get taken down like a lot of our others, so it's pointless to do
Yeah.
anyway. But
Josh,
we'll
one
need a
last thing.
backup channel at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, and just the I would say research the Overton window if you want to know that phrase where like suddenly what the public considers to be acceptable discourse is shifting, and hopefully shifting in the right direction, especially with Musk taking over Twitter. And this is again a topic for yet another video, but I just note that Musk just tweeted the Twitter files on free speech suppression soon to be published on Twitter itself. The public deserves to know what really happened, and so I'd be really curious to see what Twitter was doing behind the scenes. But again, the point is, it's just like Sandusky or like Epstein or Maxwell, whatever. The more and more you dig into this, it doesn't get better. It just gets worse.
Yeah, and there's some stuff that we can't even talk about in this video about the Balenciaga ordeal. So thank you guys for no one watching. Goodbye.